So again, that's the part of equity that can be life changing for people. Again, how to be in honor in all aspects of your life without ever being walked on by anyone or any entity. So that's kind of what I teach in that 12-week course is, honor being the biggest thing. You know, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are out there talking about, the all caps name, that capitis maximus diminutio maxima, which is that all caps name is the lowest level of, it's equivalent to slavery.
We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
All right, welcome to the show. I am Michael Storm. This is Toward Anarchy. Wherever you are finding the show, do it right now. Take a quick moment to click that like button, tap it, smash it, elbow drop on it, whatever you have to do to get that thing to respond to you. Let me know that you're out there. Let me know that you care. It's the best way that you can support me. It really is. I'm all over the web at Toward Anarchy on that social media. And, of course, towardanarchy.com. You can always follow me there, and you can sign up for the newsletter. I'm still giving out copies of Economics in One Lesson. I have many of them to give away for many months. And so that's all at towardanarchy.com. And when you get there, you will see that my guest is Andrew Macdonald, and the episode number is 2609. I forgot to note that for myself. That might come in handy, so I know where I'm at. 2609 when you get there, and all of the links and information, some stuff that we talk about, it'll all be there. It'll be right there in that space for you where it's always at. So if you find that there's something interesting, you want to know more about Andrew, you want to know what he's up to, you'll be able to find his website, freedomwithequity.com. And when you get there, it's I guess you can take a 12-week course in equity jurisprudence, and you can learn how to resolve debts and contract disputes in court proceedings using equity. And these things that we're going to talk about today, you will be familiar with some of them. They're not conversations that are unfamiliar across the network or even across this show. Legal and financial remedies sort of rooted in natural law. Andrew Macdonald, thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate you taking the time. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I didn't know there were people like you available on the Podmatch system.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's an honor to be here. Pleasure as well. And greetings, everybody.
Well, I go through that Podmatch system almost daily. Maybe not every day. I should go through it daily, but I only do the one show a week or so, maybe two sometimes. And so I don't need a lot of guests. I have more guests than I have time to invite guests to come on. But every once in a while, I'll be wandering through that Podmatch system, and I'll come across somebody like yourself, somebody who's talking about things that I understand, that I know about, and that I have conversations with people about. And I will talk about on this show, but you don't always get somebody who spent the time. It's more often. I've got a buddy. He bought a what do they call it? What is that big book? Been putting them out for years. Why is it all of a sudden I can't think of it? It's one of these things where it tells you how to file your UC1 and some stuff like that. It's a freedom book.
Cracking the code.
Yeah, something like that. One of those. Yeah, exactly. And he, he read this thing years and years ago, and of course I've read it, and I kind of approach it from the other side. I approach it from looking at the law and going, well, that doesn't work. I'm pretty sure it should go this way, and it usually seems to be kind of, it fits with that natural approach that I have towards things anyway. But then I heard about one of these books that you could buy on the internet, because the internet hasn't been around that long for some of us who are a little older. And all of a sudden there was this place you could go and you could buy and you could find this information. It would tell you about the Wizard of Oz, and it would tell you about greenbacks and silver and gold and all of these different hints and possibilities of information and ways to deal in natural law and to deal with the courts and to deal with legal remedies. And so I had to have a chat with you.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, what equity is, what I help and what I've proved with experiential knowledge, not just reading a book, not taking a course or something like that, but going through this storm, so to speak, and coming out on the other side, scathed but still alive. Yes, that cracking the code, that UCC stuff. I call that, these days I call it patriot warfare. We've been in this space for 26 plus years, and for the first 15 years of it, we were fighting. We're not taxpayers. You can't do this to us. Anarchy. Self-governance and so forth. And we were sued by the Department of Justice and IRS, and basically lost everything. UCC1 status corrections out the yang, and none of it worked. So we found this equity thing, and the remedies that it has brought to us has been just incredible. 7-figure liens totaling, from the IRS, received certificates of releases of liens. Because we had lost everything, on the verge of homelessness when we needed to learn this equity thing, trying to rebuild our lives, because in our early 50s, some guru talked to me about find an abandoned home, and eventually a judge will give you a title to it. So we did that in our little town here in Colorado. Next thing you know, I've got cops knocking on my door, arrested for 3 felonies, 2 misdemeanors, facing 12 years in prison. Just learning equity at the time, I knew not to go in and argue, to be peaceful, not testify, but ask the questions that compel the performance that I wish to happen. Next thing you know, at the 5th hearing, case dismissed, and the important part, all bonds are hereby discharged in this matter. Just by asking the questions, bringing equity to the matter, and kind of exposing their system, especially when they're dishonoring the equity we bring. Because equity doesn't argue the facts, the law, the jurisdiction, the venue, anything. The judge is the banker. One of the definition of bench is bank. So, bottom line is, we have the power of the pen just like they do. We just need to learn how to do it properly, in honor, without ever being walked on by anyone or any entity. And that's kind of what I offer through our experience in doing this and helping many, many other people do the same.
And that seems to be what it is. That's a very familiar story to me. Somebody hears about a thing and they're like, oh, hey, let's try that. And then all of a sudden they're in jail. And then they learn about another thing, which is basically just contracts and getting people to sign on contracts, or getting people to recognize that they're working under contracts. And so you teach a course in this, then. It's a 12-week course in equity jurisprudence. I mean, how's that play out?
Yeah, it starts at the introduction as to why we're in the issue we're in, from the money system. Definition of money in Black's Law Dictionary excludes notes, bonds, and evidences of debt. So around the world, around 1933, some countries sooner, Britain was in 1915, something around there, they took away the gold and the silver, which was basically the money around the world, and they gave us this debt instrument. And right now you all have in your wallets and purses have Federal Reserve notes in your wallets, or Canadian notes, or Australian notes, or euros. It's all fiat currency. It's not backed by gold and silver anymore, so it's backed by the full faith and credit of the country, which is us. we're the commercial energy that keeps the system going. So, we talk about that. We can't pay any public debt anymore because, again, they took away the gold and the silver, the money. All we can do is discharge debts. And everything is commercial. In this country in 1938, we had Erie Railroad versus Tompkins, Supreme Court case, where someone got hit by something hanging off a train, went all the way to the Supreme Court, but they used that case to basically try to merge the procedures of common law equity with their fictional admiralty commercial laws, statutes. And, they pretty much did it with common law because common law, case law is part of common law now. And in the books that I teach out of Black's Law Dictionary, Burton's Legal Thesaurus, Levine's Manual on Commercial Law, published in 1948. And when the money changed, the laws had to change. And so, they took away our ability to pay a public debt. So, equity can work on anything, any public debt, which is anything from a bank, a taxing authority, a court, anything government, related. So, those debts are all dischargeable with the commercial energy that we can give them with this, but by our signatures. Your signature is likely the most valuable asset you will ever own if you learn how to use it properly. Now, one thing you have to be very careful of is we have to be careful not to create money. And that's what a lot of people with bills of exchanges try to do, and other methods. No. If they put a bill in front of you for $10,000, credit card statement or something like that you wish to bring equity to, then they've given you the $10,000 to pay what we cannot pay because there's no lawful money on the planet. Okay, so this is basically what that 12-week course entails: is how to be in honor with the system in all aspects of your life, not to be in it, but to be, to have to deal with it. So you're not living in out in the woods in a teepee or, under a bridge in a refrigerator box or something, but to live in it without being controlled by it or under its thumb, as much or as little as you want to. You don't have to come out of the matrix. You don't have to come out of the system, although that's a possibility. We've pretty much done it. But you don't have to. Equity allows you to live your life basically the way you want to, again, without being walked on by the system, by the matrix. That's one of the courses we teach is the equity course. We also teach a trust, PMA, and ministry course for people who want to become more private, take their endeavors more private, and also getting ready to release and start teaching an escaping the matrix course for people who want to operate out of the system. No bank accounts, no government issued credentials, living off the land, wind, solar, growing your own food, all of those things. We do that. So there's, buying a home or land without a bank. That's what we've been doing for years in this, out of the matrix type of thing. So.
That seems practical. I get the legal thing, the laws, and dealing with those troubles that come up. If you can actually avoid most of that stuff by just not creating contracts with those people, just realizing that that's what you're doing is creating contracts with these people, and if you don't do that, then they can't hold you to anything. It's really kind of simple. But the sort of practical usage of living off of the grid or being disconnected, even just a little bit, like you're talking about, just a little bit, sort of halfway there, not even necessarily just disappearing into the woods, never to be seen again. Just occasional pop out and, hey, look, I'm still here. Because I'm one of these people. I don't want to disconnect from the system, as it were. I mean, I happen to like society. I generally like people. I like to have things and go places and do stuff. And so I'm not trying to disconnect from other people. I'm trying to disconnect from the chains of this multi-layered system that we live in. There's all these virtual layers on top of our real world where natural law and you and I live, and navigating those different layers of reality, and then figuring them out even understanding them, let alone navigating them, especially when we live in a society where now we've created more real virtual layers to that society, and it's just like digging through layer and layer and layer of things to try to get back to the ground of some sort of terra firma, and right back there where you can feel the ground underneath you. I've been talking about this for years and just trying to explain how there are these different layers. There's America, where there's these people that live there and they do what they do, and they're just kind of like these natural machines running around working things, and things just go and do, and what happens. And then there's this commercial layer that's been laid across it that the corporations and the government use to manipulate the real people and to get them to separate from their reality, to live in one of these other layers. And we do all the time. We don't even realize it. We think, oh yeah, I'm here I'm down on the ground every single day doing what I do, except that we're doing it for the wrong reasons. We're doing it because we have to. We're doing it to survive. We're participating in their system because we don't have another choice. But there really are other choices out there. And I don't necessarily want the choice that leaves me a hermit out in the woods, completely disconnected from everything.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned the word contract a couple times. My belief is, our rights are granted to us by God, our creator, and those are unalienable rights until we contract, and the contracts we've entered into throughout our lifetime have superseded, in other words, made void those rights. So yes, equity is that bridge from that natural law, those God created, God granted trust language rights over to their Admiralty Maritime commercial statutory laws, and in order to provide a remedy, because again, everything is commercial. Erie River versus Tompkins merged all that, made everything commercial. It talks about the law merchant, 1938, in this Supreme Court case where someone got hit by something hanging off a train. So that was the case. So everything's commercial. Even if someone has a criminal charge, and again, in order to receive equity, one must do equity and be an equitable person and integrate this into your heart. But even criminal matters are commercial. I was facing 12 years in Colorado State Prison, and I realized it was commercial. So I asked the questions of this judge with a doctorate degree in law, the questions that compelled the performance that I wanted to happen, which is to hear a case dismissed. So if someone says this isn't commercial, this isn't civil, this isn't, you can't bring equity to this matter, well, are there bonds associated with this court case? Is this court case being traded on the open market as evidenced by the QSIP number that's tracking it? And that's what a QSIP number is. It's a tracking number. There's people out there trying to say the QSIP, the court case is a QSIP, or you can use the QSIP to discharge a debt or a court case. Absolutely not true. It's a tracking number issued by the global QSIP thing, which is a company for the banks. So, but the bottom line is that does make every court case commercial, and equity is a remedy for any matter in commerce. Again, as long as somebody is honorable and acting equitable in equity. If you go out there and shoot somebody, stab somebody, cause harm to someone or their property, don't necessarily look to equity if it's intentional. An accident on the road or something, and it was a true accident. You weren't drunk, you weren't, being an idiot on the road, then yes, there's some places where equity can help on that too. But again, the system that we're living in right now, the commercial system, where there is no lawful money on the planet. This isn't just for the United States. We've got students in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, UK, England, all throughout the UK, Bulgaria, Netherlands. So anywhere in the world that has a constitution and human rights, equity can provide a remedy. Haven't spoken to anybody in North Korea yet, so maybe not there, but hey, we'll see.
Yeah, you put yourself out there long enough, eventually somebody will come knocking on your door. Maybe. I'd say it's hard to say, because we have no real view of other places. We Americans barely understand the system that they live under, let alone what these others are dealing with, or what their constitutional rights, their protected rights might be in other places. Because contrary to popular belief, America is not the only place with a constitution, and not the only place where people are guaranteed their rights. So yeah, it's not particularly special in that sense. They certainly try to make it sound like it is, but how you know it's not is exactly what we're talking about. When you can go from one court here to a court in Poland or a court in Germany or someplace, just any other way, it's certainly in the Western world ultimately, and whatever we call the Western world, and basically they're working under the same assumptions and same presumptions under law, which maybe that's a good thing. It certainly is if they're being equitable, as you say, if they're being honorable, but these systems usually aren't. That's probably the most glaring, most obvious thing, is that when the system claims that you've violated something, but there's no thing, there's no people. It's just something that they wrote on a piece of paper and said you violated it, but there's no crime, there's no victim, there's no damages. It's just a claim.
And I mean, it's done under what the legal definitions call color of law. It's only enforceable because someone contracts, volunteers for it, or, and this is the biggest issue people have, is they stand silent. They're acquiescent. Acquiescence is as if they had, someone says something or put something in front of their face as a bold-faced lie. If you stand silent to that, it's as if you had taken your pen and signed an affidavit that was 100% true. You cannot stand silent. And that's what equity does, is it gives us the questions that when someone spews something like that at us, we can ask the questions that contradict that. Not fighting, not arguing, not being belligerent, combatant, but just asking the questions that compel the performance that you wish to happen. And this is not just in, serious situations. This is in everyday life. I usually tell the story, during COVID, I had to go into the Cricket Wireless store to take care of my cell phone bill. And the general manager runs over to me and says, "You have to leave." And I said, "Why?" "I just need to take care of my cell phone bill." "You don't have a mask on. You have to leave." And I said, very calmly, very soft tone in my voice, "Are you a doctor?" She said, "No." I said, "Are you an attorney?" She said, "No, I've got a child at home and I need to, want to keep my job." And I said, "What would happen to your child if you had to spend 5 years in prison for violating my rights under color of law, so attempting to make a medical legal decision that I'm one required to wear a mask?" She let me take care of my cell phone bill, and I asked the questions. So this is an everyday life thing, and I'm not anti-mask. My background's in medicine. I'm a former fire medic, worked in the ER most of my career. I've gone through hundreds and hundreds of masks for those reasons. But I also knew what was going on with COVID. So, I wasn't real worried about it because I knew the tyranny that was going on from that episode. So again, that's the part of equity that can, be life-changing for people. Again, how to be in honor in all aspects of your life without ever being walked on by anyone or any entity. So that's kind of what I teach in that 12-week course, is, honor being the biggest thing. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are out there talking about, the all caps name, that capitis maximus diminutio maxima, which is that all caps name is the lowest level of, it's equivalent to slavery. But, they know that fiction of law is not us. We know it's not us. But we've been using that our whole lives. If you have a driver's license, it's on your driver's license. You have a bank account, it's on your checks and on your plastic. So you become the surety for that fiction of law, that all caps name. And the surety is the one liable to pay. So if it gets charged either from a credit card statement to, a traffic citation for speeding or something more serious in a court, you're the surety for it. So if it gets sentenced to jail or a fine, then we're the surety. We're the one that's liable to discharge that debt, either behind bars or, paying a fine with those Federal Reserve notes or Canadian notes or Australian notes or whatever fictional fiat currency you're using around the world. So again, because they took away the money and because everything is commercial, equity can provide remedy, being that bridge over from our God-granted rights over to the colorable fictional law that the world pretty much operates in right now.
Yeah, it's a conversation I've been having for years, and you brought up the all caps names and the straw man and people. That's that's a lot of that conversation. It's all about that name, and it's about the UCC1 and filing paperwork, and that to me it seems weird that that you would file paperwork within the system that you're trying to stay outside of and above, and somehow this magically protects you. Well, obviously it doesn't. And that was always a problem with sort of following along these lines. Neat, fun stories. Love the Wizard of Oz. Great Golden Road, Silver Slippers, the Green City of the Greenbacks, and all fantastic. The Straw Man, the Tin Man, all wonderful, fantastic fable. Doesn't do you a whole hell of a lot of good when you're standing in a courtroom if you don't understand what it is that you're doing in that room. All fanciful, fun tales, but doesn't really help you a lot in the courtroom.
Agreed. Because again, a judge thinks, talking about courtrooms, a judge is there to look at the contract, like you brought up. And so if you have an issue going on with the IRS and you're trying to do status correction to prove that you're not that all caps name, it's not going to work. There's a contract. If you're there sued by your credit card because you stopped paying because they didn't loan, we know banks don't loan money. Credit card companies don't loan money. You've created the account again with your signature in some way, shape, or form. Your signature can be very many things. The checkbox on the internet can be your signature. But no, they're just there to enforce a contract. And yes, they also have a duty to protect the emergency in this country from 1933, where they took away the money. They have a duty to keep us in their realm, in their 3D, jurisdiction of fictional commercial law. So yeah, everything's going to be a process, but the status correction thing, if someone's into status correction, great, but in my opinion, you need to know equity because you're more likely to get challenged than the rest of people out there. And there's really no way to defend that thing with the status correction. Again, we tried it in federal court, didn't work. And we lost everything using, secure party creditor process and trying to copyright the name. You can't copyright something that you didn't create. And so, the birth certificate, it's not yours. Whose name is at the top of that bad boy? It's the state of wherever you were born. That's who created it, not you. You're using that all caps name, that birth certificate, under the legal terminology of usufruct. Where you're using somebody else's property for your benefit. And that's fine. We hold equitable title to those things with a surety for it, but there's also remedy there too when the system, is coming down on you. Taxes are voluntary. We know that. Problem is if you just if you don't know how to reply to something that they put in front of your face because of that, then you're going to go down that road of being a belligerent combatant and, potentially lose everything, kind of like we did. Well, our vision here is to help people keep from going through the fire that we went through, but to take care of those issues in an honorable, peaceful way. Don't argue the debt, give them the commercial energy to discharge it so eventually they go away. No silver bullets, no magic fairy dust to sprinkle on documents. No, trying to copyright things you didn't create. It's a much more peaceful system that we teach, that we help people learn, and the success stories have just been incredible. Almost too much for me to keep up with. People just say, "Hey, Andrew, we won this battle," or whatever. So we've got over 300 people in an equity Telegram forum, where most of those are alumni who, from January 6th defendants to you name it, people who are just normal people like us who are just tired of, waking up to the system, the Great Awakening. This is our part of the Great Awakening. You and I helping people wake up to the issues that are going on, and then providing a remedy for them to live their lives the way they want to.
You know what's crazy about it? You're talking about all these people participating in the system. Not us, the people that manage the system, the bankers, the lawyers, the judges. It's been going on for so long that they don't even know. They don't even have a concept. They're just doing what they've been told to do and processing things the way they're told to process. And so part of the game is getting one of them to, in the right space to recognize that what you're doing, what you're arguing, what you're saying, what you're putting in front of them, putting back in front of them and saying, go ahead and sign it. I dare you. Get one of them to recognize that that's what's happening is harder and harder every single day. And it's weird because there's a reason for this. There's a reason to have a fictional entity to deal with, to do business with other fictional entities. And fictional entities exist because they're not real. A business is a fictional entity because there are real entities behind it, but the entity itself doesn't exist. So you have to create it. You have to put a name to it. You have to give it a number. You have to birth it. You have to put it on a birth certificate. You have to do all these things to bring it to life. And so there's a natural reason for these things that makes sense. But again, it all comes back to that equity, that acting honorably. And in the system where the people that are not acting honorably benefit from the way the system functions now, why would they change? Why would they work within another system? Or why would they acknowledge that, oh yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. This system that we have couldn't even exist if that other idea wasn't already in place, if those real people weren't really there, if there wasn't actually ways to remedy things, to reach a cure with somebody and to solve problems in that manner.
Absolutely. You mentioned the fictions. Government is a fiction. They're pieces of paper. And there's case law from 1795 when this first started happening, because you said hundreds of years, long time, yes, that says fictions, government is a fiction, so it can only deal with another fiction. So yes, they had to create that fiction of law, that all caps name. Very much proven. I mean, this isn't theory. We hear the stuff from the attorneys and stuff all the time who are trying to disprove it. Absolutely not true. It's in the law dictionary. Capitis diminutio maxima. Go look at that up in Black's Sixth. It tells you exactly what it is. So it's basically slavery. It's the highest form of lowering a man's status to that of a slave. And and it's started back in the times of Rome, to where certain classes of people couldn't give assets, or couldn't when they were getting ready to pass away, give their assets to their family if there was a difference in classes. So all of this started, and again, that's the definition of equity: is it's justice by fair dealing. And that word justice can be expanded now to anything in commerce, because everything is commercial. So again, commerce by fair dealing. When they took away the money, we can't pay a public debt, we can only discharge it, to where equity knows there's no lawful money on the planet, where equity knows that, if there's a court case, that court case, and again, like you said, a lot of times they don't even know it's compartmentalized, to where the clerk knows clerk of court knows that they send that case number that they've assigned a judge to. Assignment passes title by legal definition. So judges hold title to a case, just like the certificate to your car. But that case number goes through a clearinghouse to where a bank, to where it winds up on the stock market being traded. There's bonds. There's at least 3 bonds in any court case: bid, performance, and payment or settlement bond. Then, if it's criminal, there's an appearance bond. If someone gets sentenced to prison or prison time or jail time, then there's a penal bond. And all those bonds, the bond is a debt instrument. The Federal Reserve note, it's got two signatures on it. It's a bond. It says Federal Reserve note at the top of it. It's a debt. The definition of money in Black's Law Dictionary excludes bonds, notes, and evidences of debt. 3 strikes. Federal Reserve notes are not money. Okay, per legal definition. They can only discharge a debt dollar for dollar, as HGR 192, 1933 says. So again, there's remedy in there for any matter, just about any matter in commerce. It's not going to take care of your cell phone bill. You're not going to charge up a credit card and discharge it and charge it back up the next month. That's not equity. Anything you're receiving a service for, your cell phone bill, electric bill, gas bill, you're not going to use equity to discharge those things. But again, any public debt, equity can be used to discharge the debt. And again, what's nice about it is your choice. If you're using credit cards, then don't discharge it with equity. If you're fine, taking care of taxes and filing 1040s every single year, that's fine. If and when you awaken enough to want to bring equity to a matter, it's there.
Well, I like these conversations because they're really about understanding words. Because you brought it up a number of times yourself, and that's the Black's Law Dictionary, and some others, and there are other various places that you can go look up what words really mean, not just Webster's. And what they meant for a long time. And so people don't understand certain words, and they don't understand the things that they're using. They don't understand the instruments they're using, the debt instrument of the dollar, for instance. It's obvious that they put these things in place because you can look at the difference between money and the difference between currency, and they're glaringly obvious what they are. One has some usage, some form that exists and is useful for anything other than just facilitating exchange. The other is a controlled bank instrument used for facilitating exchange, and that's it. There is no value to it other than what the bank says it is, what the company says it is, what the country says it is. And so, of course, anybody who's dealing in real money and dealing in real wealth isn't going to want to receive money from the state. It's not going to want to receive that currency. It wants real money. It wants real equity. It wants contracts. It wants you to sign over your wealth. It wants you to sign over you. It wants your signature. That's what they want when you go to buy a house. They want your signature. You keep holding up the pen. Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize, the promissory note you signed at closing to purchase your house was deposited as cash in a transaction deposit per the Federal Reserve. So your house was paid for at closing. The problem is you signed those mortgage documents, or some jurisdictions call it a deed of trust, to where if you don't send them a check every month, you're going to wind up in a refrigerator box under a bridge someplace. So we're back with living with mommy and daddy. So yes, the promissory note paid for the house. You mentioned my books. I teach out of Black's Law, 6th edition. Burton's Legal Thesaurus. I use the 4th edition, but in Burton's, it has thesaurus is the synonyms for all these legal terms. And also in there are the maxims that might apply to those words. And one of my favorites is the word obligation. Obligations. You sign something, you're obligated to do it. And even equity will uphold a contract to the letter of the contract. However, in Burton's, one of the maxims says obligations are unbound in the same manner in which they were made binding. How is that? With this. How can they be unbound? With this, with your signature, as you just mentioned. Again, probably the most valuable asset you'll ever own, if and when you learn how to actually use it. You mentioned banking, fractionalized banking. You write a check. It's in their laws that bank can take that check and turn it into 9 to 10 times what you wrote on that check. The $1,000 check becomes 9 or 10,000 in the system. And someone told me not too long ago that has been expanded to infinite, especially during COVID. They needed to expand the credit and money supply so much that's what they're using. So they're not printing money out of thin air. There's accounting for it. We're just the chattel. We're the commercial energy they're using to do that. And you can, once we learn that and wake up to it, then again there can be remedy there.
If people would learn the language, that's what I was starting to say there a minute ago. Is I just love the words, and because they're so important. And if you go back and look at them, they're very self-explanatory. I love talking to people in the language that they supposedly understand. So when you speak to, a statist, a voter, a constitutionalist, a libertarian, a Republican, somebody like this who sort of believes in these things, and you talk to them about, I mean, we're going through it right now, right? We got ICE running around the nation acting under color of law and doing things that ultimately they shouldn't be able to do under our laws, under a natural law, under any law at all. And so we're having that conversation right now about the conservatives sort of turning their back on these principles and these ideas, and they're killing people in Minnesota. They're shooting them and saying that they don't have right to defend themselves when they weren't even defending themselves. They just had the ability to defend themselves with them, and looking at these systems and saying, well, okay, that guy doesn't have this right, that guy doesn't have that right, but not looking at the actual language of those things. I don't recall anywhere in the Bill of Rights and these protected rights that we have mentions of particular words like citizen or white man or woman or anything. There's nothing. The word is people, and then you'll get somebody that will argue the language of the word people, or they'll argue the language of the word person, and not understand it. They'll argue that a person, you're not a person, you're a people, that we're all peoples. And when person, if you go back and look at these definitions, you go back to your blacks, you look at person, a person is just what is a term for what encompasses all of you as a man. Everything, your job, you as a father, you as a king, you as whatever you are, everything. It's all of your personas. It's anything that you imbibe as an individual in your choice. And so you get people arguing in these fanciful fairy tales about certain words like that, when that's not the important part of it, when you should just be able to look at it and go, wait, people, well, we're all people. It didn't say anything about American people. It didn't say anything about citizen people. It didn't say, there's no caveat to it. There's nothing that says that this is a certain type of people. It's all the people under the jurisdiction of American law. That's how I look at these things. Now, we can argue whether there's any value to existing American law, certainly at this point, but I think if you go back, looking back that far, you go back looking at the language and the things, I think it's fairly obvious that what you're talking about is real. It's a real thing, and that it really works. And I've always looked to find the people with the conversation that can separate it from the fanciful, yellow brick road and silver slippers and greenbacks and all that. So yeah, it's all fancy, it's all fun story, and there's as much truth to it as there is truth to it. But if you don't know the rest of the story, if you don't understand what happens when you actually go into one of these maritime courts and try to make your argument in front of one of these people when they don't know what you're talking about, don't care what you're talking about, and it doesn't benefit them to acknowledge that you might be right.
Sure. And what equity can do, if someone learns this, integrates this into their heart and soul, is actually compel the performance, if necessary, in front of a judge, for them to kind of wake up if they're asleep, or if they are just doing that duty they have to protect the emergency from 1933 in this country. We can compel that performance, and that's kind of what I did is I exposed them. I would say, Judge, are you attempting to administer the estate without my permission? How does that not make you an executor de tort? That's one of the questions I asked. You would say, Andrew, you're facing 12 years in prison. Please hire an attorney. Allow me to appoint one to you. And I would say, Judge, why would I want an attorney? Don't attorneys simply atone for the dead? They're not representing you. They're representing that fiction, that all caps name. You're also, when you have an attorney, you're telling that court that you're incompetent to handle your own affairs, and you need some legal expert to stand in and talk for you. No, thank you. Now, we don't automatically fire judges in equity if one is appointed, or if we already have one when someone comes in and finds this, because they can be useful in certain ways, finding out information and so forth, but they're very restricted in what they're allowed to say or do if someone does accept them as their private attorney. So yes, that's we teach what to do with the attorneys, what to say to them, what to say to the judges. I one of the big things I know that compelled my judge to say the words in case dismissed was that I asked about the case number. I said, Judge, why does case number have a QSIP number associated with it? Doesn't QSIP stand for Committee on Uniform Security Identification Procedures? Judge, why is this? And I didn't say all of this, but this is, what we say now. Judge, why is this being traded on the open market? Are you continuing this matter for your financial benefit or the financial benefit of some third party? Which they are. So again, we're calling them out on their gig, and sometimes the cases just go away because they don't want you in their courtroom anymore, which is fine. Again, if it's a court case, we give them the commercial energy to discharge the case. Every case has bonds, which means there's a commercial value to every court case. So yeah, discharge the case and make it go away. Give them the financial ability to do that. And then if they dishonor it, we compel the performance by asking the questions that would compel that performance once we've given them the commercial energy. So it's a much more peaceful way to go about this. I'm starting to call it a peaceful revolution, equity revolution. So yes, that's what we're doing. That's our gig these days. That's our remedy, our method.
Well, once again, it's there in the language, right? When you're talking about attorneys, you're talking about a lawyer or representation. The word is counsel. You have the right to counsel. You have the right to speak to anybody you want about legal matters, and that's it's always so much fun to go into one of these things. I've watched a judge take a part of the docket and shuffle it to the bottom of the docket to clear everybody else out of the courtroom so that they don't get to hear the rest of that conversation. I've seen that. So I see it happen. And you know what else I've seen many times is the judge and the prosecuting attorney having a nice little conversation about the dinner they had a couple of nights ago. So I don't trust any of them to be honorable.
No. And again, if they're not, I mean, we've had many judges be honorable, and do what they ought to do, follow the maxim of equity, do what ought to be done, to have equity before their eyes above all else, above their colorable laws, statutes, rules, and regulations. But often not so much. Again, not because the system's corrupt. Yes, there is corruption out there, but that word is too overused out there at YouTube University. Most of the time, just look in the mirror, if something's not working. But again, they do have a duty to protect the emergency because that's the system that we live in right now, and operating in the matrix. Well, equity that I'm talking about helps you act outside of their box and helps you act outside of their box without being a belligerent combatant like the patriot warfare methods that are out there. And I'm not saying equity isn't the only game out there. There's many remedies out there, and a lot of them have worked. It's just the best remedy that we found in, again, 26 plus years of being in this space. It's really the only thing that's ever worked for us, and it's worked amazingly.
It's what is it? It's the legal equivalent of turning the question back onto somebody. It's the Socratic method, right? Mm-hmm. And so you make a statement. Well, why do you say that? What is it that compels you to say that? I'm not answering your question. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just, what's your reasoning behind it? And by the way, sign off on your reasoning so that you are personally responsible about. That's one of the things that is such a big problem with the system. That it's grown so big, and then it tries to support so many people ultimately that they try to find these ways to run you through the process and just roll you over and get the money out of you and get you out of the courtroom before you ask too many questions. And so you don't stand a lot of chance if you don't already know going in. You try to learn something like this on the fly, you might be in for a long trip.
Yeah. It's almost always, even when you do know it, it's likely to be a process because, again, they have a duty to keep you in their box. So, it's going to take some work and some asking questions. And my first hearing, in that criminal case was horrible. Second hearing was a little bit better, but not much. Third hearing, I got my act together to where, I was sounding confident. My knees were probably still shaking, but I was much more confident asking these questions. And, fourth hearing, same thing. Fifth hearing, case dismissed. All bonds are hereby discharged. So,
Well, let's see. If you did
that's
it
the
in
work.
5 hearings, you probably done it at least a month sooner than they want you to. They try to
Yeah.
pace
Well,
this stuff out so that by the time you get to that age, you're either done with it already or you give up long before then.
Agreed.
Because most of these things could be resolved within minutes if you just walk into the courtroom and address the judge under equity, under natural law, and put him in his position but basically suggesting to him that he's the banker for some other entity, and that you're not going to sign a contract with it. You don't agree to it. It's a fun world to live in when you don't have to actually go into the courtroom and try to argue one of these things, because no matter what, armed with all that information, they still have all their tricks and their traps, and it just takes you kind of slipping up in one way to kind of, if you're lucky, just end up back at the beginning of the process and sort of have to start all over again. If you're not lucky, it wraps up right there, and you end up making good on the obligation, whether you wanted to or not.
Most of the time, when people and students of ours are using equity, usually winds up not going to court. So it's actually much rarer that people here go to court. Most people that want to learn this, if there's already a court case happening, then it's already there, and equity can help provide remedy. But yeah, just because again, this is done much more honorably than the other methods out there, like credit card matter. Telling them to validate the debt. They don't have to validate that debt. They've got a signature. They've got a contract with you. They don't have to, that worked some, 15, 20 years ago, not so much anymore because, they've realized, hey, there's a contract. Judges know there's a contract. So if you do get sued by the credit card company, that's what the judge is looking at, there's a contract. So, you have an obligation. When you learn that that obligation can be unbound with this, then the whole world can open up to you. So
Yeah, the power of the pen, the power of your own signature. It's something that's been taken away from us for a long time, and we really don't know it. And again, I still think that there's so many of them that don't know it. That they just don't know. They're not taught. They're not taught. I don't think that if you go to Cornell that they're necessarily having classes in equity. They are, but they're not. You know what I mean?
sure. Well, again, where did equity start? They learned equity, that it's a law form, but they're taught that equity was merged, and equity was not merged with admiralty, maritime, commercial, statutory law. The procedures was merged. You talk about Code of Federal Regulations, rules of civil procedure. Those are what they merged. Try to merge these other law forms with their fictional law. They had to. When the money changed, the laws had to change. So that's what they've done. So certainly they're not teaching. They would lose their bar card, which is their license. There is no license to practice law, as you mentioned. You have the right to counsel, but that bar card is their club membership, and they lose it. You hire an attorney, again, telling the judge that you're incompetent to handle your affairs, but also you think that you hire an attorney that you're top of the totem pole. No, the port system is the top of the total pole. Their loyalty, their income is going to be next, and you're third or fourth down the totem pole as far as the loyalty goes. If when you hire an attorney, and that's fine if you need one for a certain contracts or business stuff like that, but not as necessary as they claim that it is, because again, that's their business. They're going to protect it, and the system is, Congress is run by attorneys, and so is the system between attorneys and bankers. Hey, that's why we're in the position that we're in, and there are ways around it.
What's the easiest way for somebody? Is it just over the computer? You just go sign up for the course. You just sit in front of the computer. You guys chat for a while. You do in-person stuff. We're down to like the last 4 minutes or so. So if there's anything else you want to just drop in there.
Yeah, stop by freedomwithequity.com. We've got some other podcasts on there. If you join as a private member, it's $4.99. You can cancel anytime. Then there's a button where you can schedule a 15-minute call with me. I'm on the phone usually. And see if ask any questions and see if equity resonates with you or not. If it does, then there's some opportunities to continue the education with that to move forward. And be happy. This is what I do. I talk to people on the phone pretty much throughout the day, and just see if this resonates with them. My vision is to raise the level of consciousness of this planet to a more peaceful but fair system around the world, whether it's banking, justice system, and equity just allows us to do that to a very high extent. But how do we change the consciousness of the planet? Is we change ourselves. So the more people that learn this, that are using it right now, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people around the world doing this right now. And I didn't learn this from one person. I traveled the country when I needed to, and then we put the pieces of the puzzle together. And as things need to change with documents, with notices that we teach, as they move the cheese, so to speak, then some changes are necessary in what we're doing and asking. So yeah, freedomwithequity.com is the website. Be happy to speak with anybody.
Yeah, that's really great. I really appreciate what you're doing there, because it's something that I've kind of envisioned. I think that would be really neat for a larger scale sort of movement in this direction with personal counsel. Just a new layer, a new level, a new team of players playing for the people on that playing field, and offering that that counsel, that legal counsel on equity, and just the power of the individual to sort of discharge things and do away with fictions. Let's be real clear about this. We're talking about fictions. You made it a clear point a couple of times here that we're not talking about discharging obligations, things that you actually signed up for and agreed for. You want to play that game, that's a different game. Maybe you'll have a little success with it, maybe you won't. But it's a different game. It's not the same conversation. It's not the same thing we're talking about.
Agreed.
Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time, and I hope that maybe somebody will reach out to you and mention that they heard it on the show here, because I'd be curious. I'm always curious to know when something resonates with my audience, and I know that these conversations, particularly the separation from the fantasy and the reality of what you can and can't do with the power of the pen there. And so it's great talking to you. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Likewise, and I appreciate it. And I do keep track of anybody that refers. I always ask how you heard about us, so I'll stay in touch with you and
that'd be awesome.
Yep.
Very
Will do.
cool. Thank you so much,
Michael.
Andrew Macdonald, freedomwithequity.com. Pay him a visit and see what happens, because you got nothing to lose. I'll tell you that. We're already on the losing side of this thing.
Well, let's turn that around.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you,
the rest of you, we'll see you next time. Till then, take care.
The truth. This is a court of law, Judge Stone. This is not a place for truth. This is a place for lies. Everybody who comes here lies. The plaintiffs lie, the defendants lie, the lawyers lie, the cops lie. Everybody lies. And you expect me to sift through all this and extract the truth from all that rubble? That's what we call justice. Well, there is no justice. There never was. There never will be. Order! 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 Order in the court!
You're listening to Toward Anarchy.